Story 1: The Midnight Delivery. My DoorDash shift was supposed to end at midnight. I was exhausted, the kind of bone-deep fatigue that makes your entire body ache. Just one more delivery, I told myself. The address was on the outskirts of town, in a neighborhood I wasn't familiar with. But the order was from a regular customer, a good tipper, and I needed the money. The drive was longer than expected. My GPS took me down a series of winding roads, each darker and narrower than the last. I had second thoughts as I navigated through the dense forest, but the thought of the generous tip kept me going. Finally, the GPS announced that I had arrived at my destination. I looked around, puzzled. There was no house in sight, just an overgrown path leading into the woods. I double-checked the address. It was correct. I turned on my high beams and squinted into the darkness, hoping to catch a glimpse of the house. Still nothing. I decided to follow the path on foot, carrying the bag of food. The night was eerily silent, save for the crunch of leaves under my shoes and the occasional hoot of an owl. After a few minutes, I spotted a dim light in the distance. As I got closer, the light revealed a dilapidated cabin, barely standing. My heart pounded in my chest, but I forced myself to keep going. I approached the door and knocked, my knuckles rapping against the weathered wood. No answer. I knocked again, louder this time. Still nothing. I was about to turn back when the door creaked open. A woman stood there, her face partially obscured by shadows. She looked ancient, her skin like parchment, and her eyes, sunken and dark, seemed to bore into my soul. "Delivery from DoorDash," I stammered, holding out the bag. She took it without a word, her skeletal hand brushing against mine, sending a chill down my spine. I wanted to leave, but I couldn't move. She stared at me for what felt like an eternity, then finally stepped back and closed the door. I turned and practically sprinted back to my car. As I drove away, my phone buzzed. It was a message from the customer, thanking me for the delivery and adding a generous tip. I glanced at the rearview mirror and saw the cabin's light flicker out. I sped up, eager to put as much distance between me and that place as possible. A few days later, curiosity got the better of me. I looked up the address online. What I found sent a shiver down my spine. The cabin had burned down years ago, and the old woman who lived there had perished in the fire. No one had lived there since. I deleted the DoorDash app that night. It was a typical Friday evening, busy with orders. I had just picked up a sushi delivery for a customer named Eric. The address was an upscale apartment complex downtown. I'd been there a few times before, the tips were usually good, and the security was tight, which made me feel safe. When I arrived, I texted Eric to let him know I was at the gate. No response. I tried calling, but it went straight to voicemail. I waited for a few minutes, hoping he would get back to me. After 10 minutes, I decided to buzz his apartment number. No answer. I was about to give up and mark the order as undeliverable when I noticed a man standing by the entrance, waving at me. He was in his late 30s, wearing a dark hoodie and jeans. "Are you Eric?" I asked, holding up the bag of sushi. "Yeah, sorry about that. Phone died," he said, smiling sheepishly. He took the bag and handed me a $20 bill. "Thanks for the trouble." I thanked him and headed back to my car. Something about the interaction felt off, but I brushed it aside. It had been a long day, and I was eager to finish my shift. A few hours later, as I was about to call it a night, I got a notification from DoorDash. Eric had left a review. It was 1 star. Curious and a bit annoyed, I read the review. Driver never showed up. Waited for an hour and had to order again. Terrible service. My heart sank. I knew I had delivered the order. Maybe there was a mix-up. I decided to call DoorDash support. After explaining the situation, they told me they would look into it and get back to me. I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling as I drove home. The next day, I got a call from DoorDash. The representative's voice was grave. "We've investigated the matter, and there's something you should know. The real Eric contacted us. He said he never received his order. We checked the security footage from his apartment complex, and it shows you handing the food to someone else." I felt a chill run down my spine. Who did I give the food to? We don't know. But the person you described doesn't match Eric's description. We've reported the incident to the police. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept replaying the events. Who was that man? Why did he impersonate Eric? And how did he know about the delivery? A week later, I received an update. The police had tracked down the man. He was a resident of the same apartment complex, someone with a history of petty crimes. He had seen the delivery and decided to take a chance, knowing Eric wouldn't be home. The police arrested him, but the experience left me shaken. I continued working for DoorDash, but I was more cautious, always double-checking the customer's identity before handing over the food. The incident stayed with me, a reminder that even in the most mundane jobs, danger could be lurking around the corner.
Story 3. The House That Wasn't There. I've been a DoorDash driver for over 2 years, and I thought I'd seen it all. That was until last fall, when I received an order that would change my perspective on reality itself. It was a rainy evening, the kind where the sky feels perpetually dark, and the rain falls in relentless sheets. I had just finished a delivery, and was about to call it a night, when a new order popped up. It was from a diner I knew well, but the delivery address was unfamiliar. An old residential area on the edge of town. The rain made the drive slow and treacherous. The wipers struggled to keep the windshield clear, and the roads were slick. The address led me to a narrow, winding road lined with dense trees. I finally pulled up to what appeared to be an old, Victorian-style house. It looked out of place, like something from another era, with its ornate woodwork and towering spires. I parked and texted the customer, "I'm here with your delivery." No response. I tried calling, but it went to voicemail. Frustrated and wet, I decided to take the food to the door. The house loomed above me, its windows dark and uninviting. I rang the doorbell, but there was no sound. I knocked, and after a moment, the door creaked open. A man stood there, his face partially hidden in the shadows. He was dressed in old-fashioned clothing, a suit that looked like it belonged in a museum. "Delivery from DoorDash," I said, holding up the bag. He smiled, a thin, almost imperceptible smile. "Thank you. Please come in and set it on the table." I hesitated but stepped inside. The house was dimly lit, with flickering candles casting long shadows on the walls. The air was thick with the scent of something sweet and decaying. I followed him to a dining room where an elaborate table was set, but there was no food on it, just a collection of dusty, antique plates and silverware. "Just put it there," he said, pointing to the center of the table. I set the bag down and turned to leave. "Have a good night," I mumbled, eager to get out of there. As I reached the door, he called after me, "Wait." I turned, and he was holding out a tip. It was an old coin, something I'd never seen before. I didn't want to be rude, so I took it and hurried back to my car. Driving away, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. I glanced at the coin under the dim light of my dashboard. It was dated 1893. Weird, I thought, but maybe it was a collector's item. When I got home, I looked it up online. To my surprise, it was a valuable antique. I wondered why someone would give it as a tip for a food delivery. Curiosity got the better of me, and the next day, I decided to drive back to the house. I wanted to return the coin and maybe learn more about the strange man. But when I arrived, my heart nearly stopped. The house was gone. In its place was an empty lot, overgrown with weeds and wildflowers. I asked a neighbor about the house. They looked at me like I was crazy. "There's never been a house there," they said. "That lot's been empty for as long as I can remember." I showed them the coin, and their eyes widened. "That's impossible," they whispered. "There was a fire here in 1893. A family lived in a house just like you described. They all died in the fire." I left, my mind racing. Had I really seen a ghost? Delivered food to a house that hadn't existed for over a century? The coin was proof enough for me. I kept it as a reminder of that eerie night, a night when reality and the supernatural blurred, making me question everything I thought I knew about the world.